Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about how to deal with your emotional baggage in a relationship. So this is actually a huge topic and I obviously can't cover it in one video, but essentially what happens in relationships is that we bring our emotional baggage, the things that we haven't dealt with in our lives that are still impacting all of our relationships actually, but they really come to the forefront in our intimate relationships or any of our close relationships because we feel more exposed and vulnerable in those relationships. So what typically happens to all of us is that we have stuff that happens to us in our lives. A lot of it does come from our childhood. When I talk about baggage, what I mean is all of the emotional sort of disturbances we have in our character and our personalities that are not positive for us or others in our lives. So this happens from experiences that we interpret generally as children is the most influential time in our lives. So how our parents or primary caregivers and influencers like teachers or coaches or babysitters, any of those people who were a strong influence in our care at an early age will have left their mark, sometimes literally, but they leave a mark on our psyche, and as well as any other experiences that we have that may not have anything to do with our primary caregivers. Like if we fell off our bike and skinned our knee and a parent ran out and was freaking out about it, then we may have some unresolved fear issues about taking chances because we may not want to disappoint someone like we thought we did with our mom or whatever. So wherever we have a difficulty with dealing with other people or even with ourselves, then we have some unresolved emotional baggage. So the easiest way to see where this shows up in our lives is to see where we're stuck and not moving forward, even though we know we should be moving forward. Like it could be that we're not moving forward in a career, that we are self-sabotaging in our finances, or that we continuously look for partners that are going to reject or abandon us. So those are some of the obvious ones, and there are many, many others because obviously people are very complex. How to deal with this is the first step, of course, to anything is acknowledgement. So you can't change something that you're not aware of. And to be aware of where your baggage is showing up, all you have to do, well, not all you have to do, but the first thing you have to do is look at your negative emotions. So negative emotions are not necessarily bad, and particularly anger is not a bad thing. It's how we actually behave in the world with those emotions that can potentially be disruptive or dysfunctional for us and others. And so when we have a negative emotion, the thing you need to do is to stop and evaluate, like, where is this emotion coming from? Like this reaction, right? Like a lot of times we will react instead of respond. React means it's automatic, it's instant. It comes from generally our fight or flight area of the brain, whereas responding actually comes from the frontal cortex of our brain, or the area where we're actually rational and reasoning. So when we have negative emotions, it's good to look at them and really try to ask ourselves why we're having this reaction. Like, why are we triggered? And most of the time, even though it may seem like it's from outside or external events or people, it's within ourselves. So someone could have the very same experience. Let's say someone insults you or rejects you, and you might react in a certain way, but somebody else won't necessarily react in the same way. And that's also a very good example of, if someone does treat you disrespectfully, that's more a reflection of who they are, not you necessarily. You may have also triggered something in them to create that reaction or that behavior, but that is fundamentally about them if they choose to act out on those negative feelings. And same with you, same with me. When we have a negative feeling, how we choose to express that feeling or deal with it will determine whether or not we are actually being healthy in our relationships or detrimental. So as an example, if you're rejected, you might take that personally, but you don't have to. You can change that to just believing that the other person doesn't know you well enough, or you're not their type, or any number of things that are not as personal as I'm just not good enough. So that's something that you really need to catch yourself, is in your thinking. So the first place it starts is actually in the subconscious. So that's even below our conscious thought. And that's way too much to go into in this video, but I do cover that quite extensively in my Wake Up to Love course, which I'll put a link to in the notes below the video. But it's not easy work, because it's taken us this long to become who we are today. So if we want to become someone different than we are today, as in our better self, as in our healthier, happier, more attractive self, then we have to start changing our thoughts. And we obviously cannot change or have control of our subconscious thoughts from a conscious level, but we can control and dictate, that's not a very good word, but guide our conscious thoughts so that they eventually influence our subconscious thoughts, and then we end up having different behaviors in the world, because all of our behaviors come from our thoughts, whether they're subconscious or conscious. And oftentimes it's the subconscious that control most of our behaviors, because we allow our subconscious to trigger us and to react without thinking, without responding. So this doesn't kind of talk too much specifically about relationships, except that when we do have negative feelings come up in relationships, which is going to happen far more often than it does with people that we're able to keep an emotional distance from, like coworkers or acquaintances, or people that we don't actually entrust with our secrets and vulnerabilities and our heart, basically, then we are going to find that our stuff that we haven't dealt with will come up, and it'll keep coming up until we've actually dealt with it. So this explains like what it is and why it is, and I'm actually going to give you 3 tips, to just the tip, but 3 of them, to work on Wingmam. No, don't work on Wingmam. To work on dealing with these emotions as they come up. So as soon as you possibly can, when you have a negative emotion, even if it's like after the fact that you've already reacted, stop and just reevaluate, like see where that's coming from, and be honest with yourself. The key to being able to deal with baggage effectively is to take responsibility for yourself. This means that there's no blame. You can't play the blame game if you want to win in love. So you're going to evaluate, where is this negative emotion coming from? What is this negative emotion? Is it serving me? What's the story behind it? Like, what kind of story am I telling myself, or how am I interpreting these events that's causing me to be angry? And then the next thing is to ask yourself, what can I do about it? And you have to be brutally honest with yourself and delicately honest with people that are in your lives if you need to ask them for changes. And being honest means saying, look, I'm having a really negative feeling about what's just happened here. I need to evaluate what's going on. Right now, this is what I need from you. Can you give it to me? Here's how I see this happening, but are you capable and willing to give this to me? A side note is that you can't expect or demand people to meet your needs. You can ask or request respectfully, but it's up to them to choose whether or not your request also suits their values and their needs. So you ask for what you want in a loving, kind way. If you can't do that immediately, then you need to take a time out until you can actually have a loving conversation. Otherwise, it's ineffective. So ask for what you need, and then also ask them, what can I do? If they agree to meet your need, or if you agree to some kind of a compromise, then ask them, what can I do to help you help me meet my need? So what can I do that will support you in you supporting me? And so they might think about that, and they might have a solution that's like, okay, well, if you ask me this way, or if you wait till you're not angry, or if you hug me for 5 minutes before we have the conversation, whatever. They may come up with something that you hadn't thought of. And even if they don't have anything immediately that they can offer you, and to support them in supporting you, then they will feel respected that you're trying to help them help you. So those are the keys. Stop, be aware, evaluate yourself, be honest with yourself and others, and ask for what you need gently and respectfully and lovingly, and ask how you can help them provide what you need. And sometimes they're not going to be able to, and then you're going to have to decide if it's a deal breaker or not. Not everything is a deal breaker. I watched a documentary on a guy who's been married forever, and of course he's like a couples psychologist. One of the takeaways from that particular program was that 67% of the issues couples fight about never get resolved. 67% never get resolved. So you have to just decide in advance that some things are not going to be resolved, and you need to know before going into a relationship whether or not there are deal breakers. That brings me to another topic, sex. I'll do that in another video. So those are the stages of dealing with conflict in a relationship. Yeah. If you're interested, then do look at my course, because it will take you through the steps on how to actually make the changes in your life and in your world personally to deal with that. And it's a course that's for single guys, but it's actually valuable to every guy, because if you're in a relationship and it's not working well for you, then there's some stuff that you haven't dealt with and that you need to. And this doesn't mean that you need to avoid relationships until you're healed, because sometimes that's a lifelong journey, and relationships are the best places for practice on improving ourselves, as long as we actually learn from it. And learning includes taking new actions instead of doing the same thing over and over and over again. What's the definition of crazy? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So I hope that helped. If you have more specific questions, then please do write it in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, and thanks for being here. I'm going to talk about something very important. How to dwindle stuff. No, let's see, what is it?